Ladies and gentlemen, your servant published an article, not just on my website, but on somebody else's website, and not just a website, on a website that is, at least here in Belgium and the Netherlands, quite important and quite famous. I'm talking about Klassiek Centraal, which is Dutch for Central Classic or Classic Central. How do you translate that? This is an online magazine that talks about classical music uniquely. They make reviews of CDs, they make interviews, they have announcements, and they have news, and they have also opinion articles, editorials, whatsoever. So you see here, by the way, a picture of the Leuven organ, where I am titular organist, so to say. That's a project I've been talking about quite a lot on this channel, maybe a little longer ago. And now it's tomorrow. Actually, I'm recording this video the 25th of April. We have the 26th of April there, a 12-hour marathon, musical marathon for peace. That's the third edition we have. So it's a huge event, in fact. And so you see all of kinds of articles, and it's beautiful and I think professionally done. And there is my article, an opinion. So what I want to do in this video is take you through that article. Obviously, we're not going to read it together. You can read that when you are finished with this video. I will put a link in the description box. But I want to take you through that video and just have my comment, the author's comment on the article. But before we do that, it's important, I think, to mention that I didn't apply to be published. The editors and the owners of Klassiek Centraal actually came to me. They were, for a longer time, I didn't know that, subscribed to my email list. There is a link in the description if you want that as well. You get notifications of all the things that we are releasing, and you get a free podcast from our Patreon page for free to see if that is something for you. But the way that these people talked about what they've heard in our recording was actually touching to me. In that context, of course, it was great to write this article, and it was a great experience also writing that. It's so different compared to a YouTube video, and it's different compared to a book. But enough about this introduction. Just wanted to make these points clear. I'm going to take you to the article, and before we do that, as always, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. That helps big time, and I want to grow this channel to 100,000 subscribers. Share these videos. I know my audience is not like the generation of sharing with their phones and whatever, but do share it with your friends. It helps really a lot. And then secondly, much love to my Patreons, because they make it possible that I'm recording these videos for you, that I'm doing the research I'm doing, that I just take days off just to write the book, which is end of June. The manuscript will be finished, and it's doable. For the first time now, I see the end of the tunnel. It will not be published in July, but the end of the manuscript, like the finished manuscript, hopefully completely translated as well, that would mean that's a milestone. From then, it's just a matter of getting this book published. So there's a link also to my Patreon page in the description box. And as I said before, when you subscribe to the email list, you get one podcast for free as a welcome gift. And you want to hear that, because these podcasts on Patreon, we get so much positive feedback for them. I really would love my podcast. It's just a matter of time. I don't find the time to really organize it, but so nice to talk to Stefan. Alberto will come on the podcast. We have other people that are planned, and so we want to also take this podcast to a public space. Anyways, enough YouTube bashing. I'm not YouTube bashing, but a podcast is a little bit of slower format, and I really like that. Anyways, we go to the article. This is obviously written in Dutch, but no worries. We have excellent Google translation these days, and let's translate that. I thought it was already ready to translate. Maybe it's here. Yeah, it's there. Okay, there we have Beethoven's Broken Metronome, an attempt at restoration. This is a beautiful picture. I really like this picture with Alberto, in his younger years, I would say. This picture tells it all. Me sitting at the piano, okay, let him play on his piano, let him do his thing, So, and it's doing that. We are releasing the Chopin recordings, Volume 1, on Kickstarter, beginning of June. Again, subscribe to the email list. You will be notified. And that will be something I'm looking forward to. Actually, I'm looking forward to volume 2 as well. The guy is busy now recording Beethoven, as you know. That will be this year and next year, so that we have 30 CDs on Beethoven's keyboard works, everything. And the first box, as I said, is almost here. I'm really thrilled to share that. I will share it when it's here. But anyways, to the article. So what's so important? If you want to talk about reconstructing something or just solving something, the first thing you have to really define is like, what's the problem? What is the problem? Remember last week when we talked about the empty boxes, I shared with you also the introduction to the doctoral thesis that Martin Noortuin wrote. I mean, he's a smart guy. I have nothing but respect for him. So his thesis on Beethoven's intentions, tempo indications, well, starts by saying like, yeah, I'm not going to test this. I'm not responsible for the applicability of these metronome marks. And by doing that, it's like, okay, but why are you researching this? You need to define that problem. It's not mentioned anywhere. Sometimes people just hint on like, okay, there's a lot of debate. That's maybe that's the best you can get. A lot of people debate that, a lot of scholars, a lot of musicians. But what do they debate? What is it? What is the problem? Again, once you know that, you will see it everywhere, or you will see the lack of defining the problem everywhere. And that's why the book, but all the book will, like the first part, will be dedicated to that definition. You have so many angles to start from there. And so one of the angles is, and I choose that one here in the article, is like the sources and the witnesses, the eye and the ear witnesses of that time, talking about musical performances of that time. I start here with Gottfried Wilhelm Fink. In 1839, this guy writes about Mozart performances that they are barbaric. And why are they barbaric? Because people played way too fast. Now, this is taken in musicology oftentimes, if not always, to say like, okay, but we lived there in the 1840s, 1850s, Wagner came and tempos actually slowed down so much. They romanticized. Romanticizing is always then equal with slowing down, which I never understood why that necessarily had to happen. When I'm in a very romantic situation, I'm not going to go into details. My heart is not necessarily going slower, I can tell you that. But anyways, they take sources like these to say, okay, but it was Fink's personal romantic opinion that that actually comments on musicians that play way too fast in comparison to his opinion or his taste. That was changed because music was supposedly to play much slower compared to original, because we have the metronome marks, right? We know that Beethoven played so fast because of his metronome marks, and this guy says like, okay, people play too fast. Yeah, that's a romanticized opinion. But the point is that's not correct, because these people make it very clear what they are talking about. They talk about playing way too fast compared to the original. The change of the story, the paradigm shift already here is that these sources, these persons didn't project their own developed taste, romantic taste, so to say, and wanted everybody to play slower compared to the original tempos, which are the metronome marks, where the orchestras supposedly were still playing at as old traditional tempos. No, they make their point very clear. They say to their contemporary musicians, you are playing so fast, so much faster than originally was meant by the composers, that I'm going to write an article in which I'm going to blame you for barbaric performances. That are quite some words. And in order to prove that, he invited Tomacek, composer, musician. I mean, not many people today still know Tomacek, but he was a very important musician back in the days, very known and very well connected. And so Tomacek was there in Prague in 1791, just a few months or a year after Mozart had the premiere of Don Giovanni. So he actually gave tempos, metronome marks, for what he remembers. And people say like, okay, but that's not like, how can you remember tempos like 40 years ago, which is true. But I don't care, because what I care about is what Tomacek, in the context of this article written by Fink gave as tempo indications for a performance of which he says like, okay, this is a proof of how much slower it was. Those metronome marks, whether it represent Mozart or not, I don't care at all. It's not important. It reflects Tomacek's view on the past, not even necessarily his view of the current situation in 1839, but of the past, to prove the point that orchestras in 1839 played way faster. Faster than what? Faster than these metronome marks. Well, the metronome marks by Tomacek are among the most problematic we have today. And I make that point here. Norrington, one of the single beat conductors, I think in 27 pieces he was slower, to considerably slower than the Tomacek metronome marks, while claiming that single beat is the obvious solution. So there is something already there and that's the first thing I've done in the article, that if you just think about it 5 seconds straight, you say, but this doesn't make any sense. We have to find another solution. Solution, obviously, you know what it is. There's another source here, 1821. That's Mr. Kiesewetter, who went to London. You can read that, and many of you will still remember that source or not. I should actually make another video about it. But you see already then, there's like a speeding up compared to what we now have as evidence was the tempo of the Vienna period, which is highly problematic. Defining that problem, guys, that's the most important thing you have to do in order to reconstruct something. What are you researching? That's why so many discussions on and offline do not make any sense, because people do not realize what the problem is. And with music, it's difficult because you say that we have so many metronome marks that are problematic. Yeah, I mean, we have a handful, right? Some etudes of Chopin, and we have the Hammerklavier Sonata. So if you're talking to people, or you're reading people online or in my comment box that don't realize how big of a problem we have. You hear me often refer to Czerny's Opus 299. So it freaks some people out. I know that. Why? I do that because it's the most simple access for you, if you're not familiar with this, to go there and check out for yourself how big of a problem we have. That's not a unique situation, the Czerny etudes. The Czerny etudes is just one of the etudes bundles that are there, of the many that are just unplayable. 14.4 notes per second, just to start. The simple C major etude, nobody's playing that in that tempo. And if you would try, then go to number 2, where you have that for the left hand. Then you go to number 4 when you raises the bar to 16 notes per second. Or go to the etudes with repeated notes and then figure out how you do that even on a well-regulated Steinway with double escapement, which Czerny didn't have, nor did his students have that. So defining the problem is super important and difficult. And therefore, I'm not saying like, guys, in this article, we have so many problematic metronomes. No, marks. No, I start from problematic metronome marks from which we have a contextual, like we can reconstruct a context around it and say like people played much faster than that. When you would time travel to 1839, Leipzig, I think Fink lived, then you would not hear Beethoven played in the way that it was supposed to have, according to Beethoven, supposedly had to be played according to his tempos. You would hear a much faster performance. And so then the question is, of course, what is the solution? Another guy here, Adolf Bernhard Marx, don't have to repeat the story. We brought it several times. I will repeat that every time Alberto makes one of the finales of the sonatas that he's mentioning, that people actually could play and double the speed compared to the original one, which were the metronome marks. He underlines that, he underscores that. It's super, super cool story. So I give that as a third source, because whenever people read the first sources, they might say like, okay, but this is already intriguing. There is a huge problem. How much further can we go? Well, we can go as far as double the speed in many cases, which is even starting from a faster performance than we have today. So I shared with you a recording by Valentina Lisitsa of the last part of the Moonlight Sonata, which is very impressive. She plays almost in single beat. Well, according to Marx, we would have to double that be able to double that, because in 1863 they could do that. So again, this is something where the problem is highlighted in an undeniable way. We have the problem now. how do we come to the solution? The first thing is, okay, but what are metronome marks? It sometimes surprises me that you have to explain that. Why would people, composers, whether it is in 1815, 1820, 1830, or today, why would composers or musicians give a metronome mark when their goal is not to have a precise tempo? And I know many people today, I talk to composers as well, they say like, but when I give tempos, I mean, I always give 2 fast tempos and then people play and I play my pieces slower and I'm fine with that. And so I'm so surprised when people make that argument, as if we are supposed to believe that what is true for you is true for Beethoven. So wiping out 200 years, 2 centuries of context and just time, and just connect 2 persons who have nothing to do with each other. So what I think obviously is what Beethoven had in mind. Well, there is news for these people because you can actually read what Beethoven had to say about that and so many others. That's why the book also will have like 100 quotes just telling people like what is a metronome mark. And it sounds stupid. Actually, you have to fight internally here with our team to have these quotes in the book because they will take a lot of space. But why do they need to be there? Because you have to see it. You have to see one time after the other, a whole century of quotes that a metronome is an accurate tempo indication. That once a metronome is set, that we know for eternity, that what the exact tempo of the composer was. Karl Czerny writing that for this famous etudes that I was just sharing, like the Opus 299, and also his daily exercises. Thalberg doing the same thing for his L'Art du Piano, in which are crazy metronome marks. You have to pepper it in. And I'm doing that, of course, not with 100 quotes here, but with like a few quotes. The famous one, of course, by Beethoven. I'm going to read it because if you've never heard that and you think that Beethoven was not serious about his metronome marks, well, read this. 3 months before he died, or 4 months before he died. The metronome marks will be sent to you very soon. It's Beethoven, I'm speaking here. Please wait for them. In our century, such markings are certainly necessary. Moreover, I have received letters from Berlin stating that the first performance of the symphony, that was the 9th, was received with enthusiastic applause, which I attribute largely to the metronome marks. That's Beethoven. The crazy guy with the broken metronome, right? And there comes the quote by Czerny at the beginning of the Opus 299, which nobody's talking about. Why? Because that would expose the problem. Remember the story of last week, the empty boxes. A quote like this opens that box. What's inside your box, good sir? Nothing. Czerny writes, the following exercises are intended solely to develop, increase, and maintain this aspect of virtuosity, provided that they are practiced first of all every day, at a very fast tempo indicated, with attention to all the other rules of beautiful and correct execution, after they've been thoroughly mastered. And people will jump on that. I mean, not everybody, not you, of course, but like, see, very fast tempo. See, there's a solution. Single beat. An whole beat is not very fast. Well, according to us, and by the way, I sometimes project the percentage of you who would not be able to play that. 98% of you watching right now cannot play the Opus Czerny Opus 299 in whole beat, the entire book. Not possible. You still have to play 8 notes a second. 8 notes a second. Well, that's pretty fast for many of us. Not talking even about the daily exercises. You know the story. You know, at once the crazy idea of the daily exercises. That's a crazy bundle in which you have to... I will have to make a video on that. You have to repeat 30, 20, 40 times sometimes a certain page. And Czerny backpedaled from that later. Like I said, I don't mean that you have to play the entire book. Just practice 1 hour and then a day and then 4 days or so you will master that problem of that etude. But anyways, that's crazy stuff. That's crazy stuff. And whole beat. And now I'm going to project a percentage, like not 25% of you watching right now can play the daily exercise in whole beat. It's really difficult. And so what's the importance of tempo? That's the third thing. Like, why would you want to reconstruct it? That's already like a little bit of a deviation because it doesn't... I don't care what people do with the information. The only thing we're doing is reconstruct that tempo. But of course, why would you do that? It's an important incentive for people to take it seriously. Because today, many people say, okay, yeah, but tempo is like personal. It's like your taste, and it's fine. The composer Beethoven would be fine with my tempo. Well, we have seen now already from that one quote that chances are very slim that he would. And if you read all his letters and you read the things that contemporaries and students and people who knew him had to say about this topic, you are pretty sure that he would not agree with your tempo. He would say, like, why do you take another tempo than I? Chopin, same thing. His metronome never left the piano, Mikuli writes. Why would be that? Just to look at the beautiful design of his metronome because it's still there. It was a beautiful metronome, by the way. No, it's obvious to check on the tempo stability, and things like that. So but you have to bring that story. Like, why is it important? Because changing tempo changes everything. You know that. I've made that point so often. But it surprises to me that many people don't see. For everybody, that's true, by the way. For all, let's say, professional musicians, they won't take a different tempo on the 25th and then on a concert on the 26th. It's not because the inspiration of the day, like, I'm going to play that Pathetique Sonata now, like, in a completely different... That doesn't happen. You prepare a piece, it's here mentally prepared, and then your floor is your tempo. That's the glue of the entire performance. You cannot change that just randomly. Everything changes. You don't do that when you have a concert cycle. I've made the comparison oftentimes. Andras Schiff doesn't play his Beethoven sonatas different in New York compared to in Amsterdam, compared to in Berlin or wherever he plays them. No professional does that. And so that's the proof why tempo is so important. That's also the reason why it's so difficult to talk about it. But when you talk about tempo, you just come close to what's here for many musicians. I developed that. I understand that. But you cannot have one and the other. You cannot say, okay, I do whatever I want. I developed this in my way, and still I want to be seen as someone who takes the original intentions of the composer seriously. It starts with your tempo. And so I have to write about that, because otherwise people say, like, why would you talk about that? And that's the also famous quote for us, tempo nerds, from Czerny. He says, every piece of music produces its proper effect only when played at the exact tempo prescribed by the composer, and any deviation, even the slightest, from this, whether faster or slower, can often completely destroy the feeling, beauty, and comprehensibility of the piece. I mean, I think you used another word in the original, intelligibility. That's a difficult word to pronounce, but Google has translated that in a different way. Thank you, Google, because it's easier to pronounce. This is by Czerny. Of course, that's very drastic. It doesn't give anything. The slightest deviation. So you play 92 instead of 88, the piece is destroyed. And I know that firsthand. He doesn't want to say, at least that's my interpretation, like there is nothing left of the piece, but he means the original intention by the composer. Then there's a passage here like, okay, you the first to discover that. You say, okay, we know what the problem is. We know that metronome marks actually were accurate tempo indications, that they played much faster in those days, and that actually people in those days actually cared a lot about the accurate tempo. So, okay, we all know that. But tell me, you saying that all the other people are wrong and you're right? That doesn't make any sense. So each and every time when you talk to people, and I have so much experience now in that, you talk to people who are new to this, they make the same steps in their reasoning. And it's always from the point of view not to go along with me. It's not always, but oftentimes to go along with me, but to find an escape door, to find a back door. So you have taken them through all these steps, and you say, okay, now you're with the back, with the back to the wall. You know, there's no other escape. Oh, but you're the only one who talks about this, right? So you telling me that in spite of everything that you said, which are facts and which are undeniable facts, and of which the combination actually forces us to see, to look differently to the historical past. But you're saying me that you're the first and everybody else is wrong. But yeah, but wouldn't even matter. But they have to answer that. I have to give a little bit of history of what people have been saying about that. And so I mentioned Talsma. So Talsma published in 1980 this well-known book, also not introducing, it was already done before. But he's one of the first persons who like internationalized this idea. He made several mistakes. This variable use of the metronome marks within the company wasn't a thing. But still, I mean, yeah, a long time I've thought like, okay, people are saying like, okay, but you guys are just like Talsma. That has been debunked for so many years, and I thought like I have to distance myself from Talsma or our work. But it's not completely true. Of course, we are in that tradition, but we change quite a lot compared to Talsma. We go much deeper. We present a lot more context, and but it's still a great book to read. But yeah, Lorenz Guardian's 2010 publication was based upon that, not of Talsma, but it was like a next step, huge step in the development. And our book now will be the next huge step compared to Lorenz's book that he wrote in 2010, Lorenz being one of the authors, of course, of our book as well. So there is a kind of, and then of course, the last point here in the article, it's not the last point you can make, is like, okay, but we actually care about the applicability, not like unlike Norton, who said like, okay, well, it's not my responsibility. Yes, it is our responsibility. When you make a claim that you solved something, you want to test that. You just want to test that if it works. And in whole beat, so our system, everything works. Here are all the symphonies, no problem. The singers of the ninth, no problem. In fact, now finally they could breathe. They could pronounce the word. We could have even discussions about how, not me, but the singers, how to pronounce certain words. One of the singers said like, it's the first time I had this when singing with the ninth, because otherwise it doesn't matter. You don't understand anyways what we're singing, so it's going so fast. No, pronunciation really matters. And so the proof of the pudding is of course in the eating, and that's what we are doing. And then at the end of the article, you will see that I'm advocating a little bit, of course, for the work that we're doing, announcing also the full Beethoven keyboard works and the Chopin works. And then as a last quote in the article, it will be actually the first quote in the book. It's a quote by Clive Brown, and this guy is super, super important. He writes, "Good taste is not an unchanging quality. It's in a state of constant flux. What 18th and 19th century musicians considered tasteful might seem unnatural or grotesque to us at first hearing, and they would doubtlessly have found the style of modern performance strange and probably in many ways unsatisfactory. Such considerations may prompt us to consider whether we might not experiment with more radical and daring approaches to the performance of familiar repertoire. In doing so, we may be able to recapture some of the excitement of hearing great masterpieces for the first time." Of course, Brown wrote this in his famous book on 18th and 19th century performance practice in the context of like, guys, we have to speed up so much because single beat is obviously the right approach, right? And so stop moaning about like, I don't like it. Leave your taste at the front door, as Harnoncourt said once famously. I'm using that in our book. I'm not sure, let's say it like that he is actually enjoying the idea of being served as the first epigraph, so to say, in our book. But this is the point. You should have a neutral approach compared to what you're about to hear, which is a result of research and experiment. And since there is no other solution than whole beat, there is none. You have not such thing as 1/3 beat solution, as this guy of the derivations report, this Mr. Fafner, actually suggested, yeah, we should have that. Well, that doesn't exist. It's either single beat or it's whole beat. Well, then the result might be strange and grotesque maybe at first, because it doesn't seem to be obvious to us. So I hope this quote can open people's brains for this, you know? And you have some pictures that are in the booklet as well. Here's a team of people that we sang the ninth with. A great group. And now I have to press escape. Okay. And that is the room. That's not the room where we recorded the nine. That's my personal studio. In fact, we recorded it here. In a beautiful studio environment. It was a very nice experience. So our piano here in this environment. So yeah, there you have it. It's maybe a little bit of a longer video, but again, you can touch upon so many elements that are important, the building bricks to do this research. What's your problem? Okay, what are you researching? Why do you research it? Is there a problem? Okay, then mention me that problem. Every academic research starts like that, except tempo research, and especially not metronome marks research. They cannot do that. Norton could not start his thesis saying like, you know what the problem is, guys? We cannot play these metronome marks. Therefore, I'm going to reinstall the system of which I've just been saying that we cannot do it. Doesn't make any sense, right? That's the end of the current paradigm. The paradigm with being single beat. He's saying like, I'm ending it. He's not aware of that, but it's what it is. I'm ending that because I'm not responsible for the applicability, which means you know it's not applicable. What's the use of researching something which you know it's not going to work? I mean, in any other scientific domain, this would be teared apart and just thrown in the corners. And every jury board, especially with names like Clive Brown and Barry Cooper, which were there, any other professor of their same stature and name recognition would say like, dear student, find another solution, right? Because it doesn't work. Not interested. I'm not saying that everybody needs to find big solutions, but then focus on something smaller, a building brick of something. Anyways, hope you enjoyed that. I will leave a link in the description box. Check it out, read the entire article, and let me know once you do that what you think of it. I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully that also educated you in a little bit of way of thinking. Also, when you go in discussions, I see many people go in discussions in comment boxes, which is cool. I mean, go out there and like make our case, I would say. I need that army of people that say, okay, that's enough. We're going to defend Wim's point. But think in this structure. Bring everybody who makes like a random claim. This cannot be true because that person says this and I have a recording. No. What problem are we talking about? Is there a problem? Oh, there is no problem. Well, there's a piano. I have 200 scores for you. Pick randomly one and find a pianist that can play it for you. Oh, you cannot. So you do have a problem. Or you don't want to recognize the problem. Then we don't have a discussion. Then don't waste your time. But many people will be able to be convinced this way. Okay, enough rambling. I have a look at my computer there. Anyways, I know you don't mind these longer videos because my attention rate on YouTube is insane. I'm actually proud of that. Many of you actually watch the entire video of large portions of my videos, which is super. And if you're still here, leave it in the comment box with the time code and I will give your comment a little heart because I really appreciate you. You're the best audience I can imagine. As I have the best Patreon community, link in the description box. Check it out because they enable me to do this work for you. With that out of the way, that was everything I had to say to you today. Thank you for watching and we see each other very soon again. Bye.